right? So if most people tend to identify a certain way, but there is that 0.01 that's not,
I was never denying their existence.
Okay.
I was denying the validity of the claim that those 4 levels of analysis existed independently of one another, which they don't. I made this claim when I made my first video, since we have to get into this. So the technical claim in the Ontario legislation now, and this has already happened in New York, by the way. This is not only a Canadian thing. It's happening in Australia. It's happening in New Zealand. It's happening everywhere. Here's the claim. There's biological sex, there's gender identity, there's gender expression, and there's sexual proclivity, and they vary independently. That's the technical claim. It's built into the Canadian law. That's not true.
There's lots of different kinds of talent, but in each domain it's rare, and so it's to everyone's benefit to exploit talented people to the maximum possible degree. So even if you're just selfish, you want to push for equality of opportunity, because the more talented people there are out there, the more cool stuff you get to have, and hopefully the more diverse and interesting your life is, so you can pursue equality of opportunity policies. And the Scandinavians have done that, especially trying to knock down barriers for women in the workplace. And by all accounts, by all standard theories, the Scandinavian countries and places like the Netherlands, Canada, to a slightly lesser degree, have gone farther than any other countries in pursuing those policies.
I mean, part of what marriage does, I think technically, it's the psychological equivalent of what sex does genetically. You know, if people mix gametes, right?
Yeah.
Partly because to ensure variability and to stop the propagation of parasites. That's why we don't clone. But there's that mixing as well tends to ensure that deviations from genetic health are minimized. And so the same thing happens on the psychological front, I would say, is that each person has their own idiosyncrasies, and some of those lead them down the garden path to terrible places. But if you're with someone else and you have to negotiate with them constantly, then that opens up the possibility of you mutually modifying each other's personalities so that you both become healthier, and that your joint existence is can be a paragon of sorts. And then that's what the child interacts with, is that united front of the two parents.
Right.
And so you get that longevity of view, which I think helps to mature you, but you also get the opportunity to become more fully fledged as a psychological being. And then I think that's furthered as well. I've often thought and said this, and I do believe it's true. It's very, very difficult to mature until you have children. And there are other ways of maturing, but it's hard. And the reason it's hard, I think, is because you're not mature until someone else is more important than you. Partly, again, because I think that the idea that the government or any other institution should regulate the content of your speech is absolutely it's intolerable.
I think you have a strong legal argument, right? So the government probably shouldn't mandate this. That, I'm sure a lot of people might agree with that. I'm still curious, though, in this hypothetical scenario that a student did or a person did approach you and they told you they would be harmed or they would be uncomfortable unless you referred to them with a certain pronoun, what would you do?
Well, I really have a hard time answering questions like that because they're asked in the hypothetical.
It could certainly happen, though.
It could, but my sense, because I'm a clinician, is that I generally handle those sorts of things at the level of actual detail. So I would say it would depend on the person, it would depend on the situation, it would depend on why they asked me, it would depend on how they asked me, it would depend on what I thought they were trying to accomplish by the request. It would depend on whether or not they were filming me while they were asking me. It would depend on whether they asked me in my office or in a hallway. You know, I can tell the difference between a genuine plea for understanding and a bit of political theater or political manipulation. Now, and I've dealt with people who've made all sorts of requests of me, believe me, because I've had a clinical practice for about 20 years, and my experience with a range of human behavior is, I would say, extraordinarily extensive. And so I've made all sorts of adjustments to the way I interact with people. So I can't say exactly what I would do in a given situation because I firmly believe that the devil is in the details.
Sure.
And I haven't been making a case about a specific interaction that I had actually experienced or experienced. I've been making a case, fundamentally a philosophical case, and secondarily a political case, and I think that I've made the case properly.
But you would say that you recognize a difference between a legal responsibility to do something versus a sort of an individual personal choice, I should do something,
well,
right?
Sometimes I recognize that. I mean, sometimes the legal and the philosophical and the personal issue are all the same. It's simpler when that's the case. But I also think that the issue is essentially a red herring. I mean, look, since I made that video, for one reason or another, things that I've been saying have become quite popular and not as controversial as you might think. Most of what I've accrued so far has been support. And the reason for that has very little to do with the issue of pronouns. The pronoun issue and the pronoun controversy is a pointer to something that's a lot larger, and that's why this issue has had legs. I'm not here because people are interested in my views on pronouns. Now, I happen to put my foot down, so to speak, at a particular place, because it's very frequently the case that if you're engaged in a complex philosophical dispute, which is the case for our society in general, then in order to make a statement about it, you have to make a statement in relationship to an actual cause.
A very large body of social science research going back decades has documented the vital and unique role of mothers and of fathers in childhood development. These studies have also demonstrated the negative psychological, educational, and social effects on children who have been deprived of growing up in a home with both biological parents who are married to each other. A 2013 Canadian study, which analyzed data from a very large population-based sample, revealed that the children of gay and lesbian couples are only about 65% as likely to have graduated from high school as are the children of married, opposite-sex couples.
And it's possible that that would happen with your wife, your husband, but not with children.
Well, I've been thinking about that. So, we're about to have our first child in a month, and I've been thinking about that a lot lately. It's just something that's constantly stirring in my head, that I feel like I've sort of gotten to the end of where I can get mature in my maturation process. Not that I can't change or get better at this or that or something, but I do feel like I'm at the end of one phase right now. I very much feel that. And I think I'm feeling it more and more each day as we get closer to August 22nd, which is the due date. But, the first part, you can take, whether it's a straight relationship or a gay relationship, the dance that a couple can do and the way that they can mature each other and love each other and all of those things, that's one thing. But the piece with the kids, with building this sustainable thing, it's not something that has been proven in society yet, really. There obviously are gay couples with kids. And this has been happening for decades. But it really is sort of unseen at the moment, which is why we wanted to have this conversation. And I was like, boy, I don't even know that. In some ways, I don't know that I'm the person that's supposed to have this conversation, but maybe that's exactly why I'm supposed to have this conversation.
We're trying to figure it out. I mean, maybe we can talk about exactly how it came to be that you'll have a baby in your household in 6 weeks. Talk about what you had to do to make that happen and why you made the decisions that you made and what advantages and hazards come along with that.